What the hell are you supposed to be?
Microboy is my name. And catching criminals is my game. You're under arrest.
You're not ready for Microboy. Or rather, you're not ready for the horrific treatment of Microboy. I know I wasn't. Microboy is a would-be superhero who got his powers from a modified tanning bed that gave him the ability to absorb and then utilize microwaves. He did all this because he wanted Lana Lang to love him.
She's the girl of my dreams, Mother.
So pretty. You can't be serious, Hector.
But first, a quick recap. How'd we get here? Where is here? When is here? Why is here? Recently on this channel, we did a video on Microwave Man, a super criminal, in fact billed in story as Metropolis's first super criminal, who spent 40 years traveling in space with aliens, only to return to Earth and lament that he never got to fight Superman, the hero of the modern age, because there wasn't anybody around like that when he was doing crimes. His powers were derived from the manipulation and channeling of microwaves, so he was more powerful in the modern era of 1978 than he had been in the past. With the help of his alien friends, he was de-aged and got to have a fight against Superman, which I joked was suggestive based on the text, and it's also a joke that circulated online for years. And YouTube apparently agreed because they age-gated that video's ads, meaning that only explicit ads could play on that video. There's something really amusing about that. YouTube, you missed the joke and you're making it worse. Back to the story. Superman threw that match at the behest of Microwave Man's alien friends so that he got to have one last moment of glory. And then Louis Paget, aka Microwave Man, died, having burned through all of his energy. Well, in the comments of that video, some of you were pondering something, and that was whether or not the Superboy TV series adapted this story. Only instead of Microwave Man, it was Microboy, Hector Hornsby. So, did the Superboy series adapt this comic story? The answer is sorta kinda. There is indeed an episode of the Superboy TV series called Microboy. It was the 15th episode of the second season. It initially aired January 27th, 1990. The Superboy series itself has a fascinating history and is also one of the less discussed adaptations out there. It feels a little memory hold, but it's really interesting and it went through a lot of changes as it was airing. Each season is like a little mini roller coaster. Season 2 saw the lead actor replaced, with Gerard Christopher taking over from John Hames Newton. Lex's actor also changed from seasons 1 to 2, but they explained that on screen, but not Superboy. That would be too complicated. It's still complicated when it happens. Looking at you, Batwoman. There was also more of a budget for effects. I know some of you are going to joke later that you don't see it, but there was. And the story side, they got some new executive story consultants for season 2. And they were Mark Jones and Carrie Bates. So two very different directions. On the one hand, we have the man who will go on to write and direct Leprechaun. But for our purposes, we need to look at the other writer, Carrie Bates, who was an established DC Comics writer. And we need to pay extra attention to him in this instance because he's also the author of the Microwave Man issues. He wrote those stories in Action Comics 487 and 488 in 1978. And he is also the writer as well as story consultant on the Microboy episode specifically. He does borrow heavily from his original story for this episode, but unfortunately it's to this episode's detriment. Another factor at play is that Superboy had a 30-minute time slot, which means each episode was pretty much 20 to 22 minutes. You gotta get those ads in there. And the episode suffers for it. You'll see what I mean in a minute, for let us examine Microboy, because this series doesn't get talked about enough. Perhaps because it's largely easiest to find in potato quality. SD was the highest quality I could get on short notice, so it's what we're going with. Amazon took my $2. Nay, Microboy took my $2. No shade though, you can do a lot with potatoes.
Boil them, mash them, stick them in a stew.
I'm Sasha, this is Casually Comics, and let's meet Microboy. We open right away on Hector, aka Microboy. He is played by Frank Military, who is by far the strongest part of the episode. He goes all in and sells all of the feelings that Microboy has.
Let's not forget about love. I'll never find true love either. It's for other people.
No matter how ludicrous the costumes, props, or locations, he is committed. And it's noted and appreciated. He really elevates the episode. It's still a bit of a campier performance though, but that seems to be because of the genre and the expectations for genre acting in shows like this at the time.
No one reads my journal. No one.
Not that there weren't exceptions, but there were general rules. And it tended to be that you could camp it up when it came to these types of series. I ended up liking Military in this episode so much, I looked into what he did after it. He wouldn't go on to do much in front of the camera, but has quite the successful career as a producer. But before all that, there was Microboy in the tanning bed that he modified, and they even acknowledge it as such in the episode. He did this to give himself superpowers. The episode really wants you to know that he's a down and out nerd, but it goes about it in a very aggressive and uncomfortably abusive way.
Remind me more of your father every day. He was a sorry excuse for a human being. And you're no better.
This is by giving him an unsupportive mother, but she is so over the top, so abrasive and nasty that I spent most of the episode after she was introduced wondering if he was going to murder her at some point, especially with how they edited and cut some scenes.
What are you doing, Hector?
No, Mother. Not Hector. Microboy.
She starts reading his journal, and I was amazed that it wasn't just full of entries about how he's about to become a serial killer.
Once I begin to appear in public, people will forget all about Superboy.
You can't read that, it's private.
Microboy will be the one they talk about.
From here on out, every scene with his mom will either have a fade to black for a commercial or an abrupt cut to another scene that again will leave me thinking and wondering, is she dead?
Do you hear me, Hector?
I hear you, Mother.
There was only one line of confirmation at the end that let me know that she was alive, and I'm not sure if I fully believe it. Now, while establishing this negative relationship is important for explaining where exactly Hector's headspace is and why he doesn't have high self-esteem or really believe in himself, the episode spends too much time here because everything else ends up having to be rushed, as does our solution element. And they take this from the comics. They use the solution they didn't use. Let me explain. In the comic story, the initial proposed solution was that Superman was going to take Microwave Man back in time to before the proliferation of technology using microwaves to nullify his powers. And then that just didn't happen. Instead, they had that force to the knees duel, and then he dived so that Microwave Man could have his moment. But this episode decides to go with the original solution, which means they have to introduce the concept of time travel and how we're gonna go about it. And this is done a bit clunkily by having Superboy just be observing a time travel experiment at Star Labs. It's Chekhov's time travel experiment. This is also where Superboy learns that there's been a mysterious siphoning off of microwaves. So at this point, we're 5 minutes in and we're still explaining Microboy's powers and his motivations.
I draw microwaves out of the air and convert them into energy that I now have at my fingertips.
Now, despite seeing her son achieve superpowers before her eyes, despite him clearly putting his engineering degree she just berated him for not using to good use, she continues to abuse him because we need him to be kind of villainous because he was in the original story, I guess. But extra steps are added here because he didn't do this to be a criminal. No, he did this for love. For Lana, so that she would notice him. We're in Silver Age story logic here, which is that Lana likes Superboy, and hence, if he wants her attention, he needs to be super like Superboy. It tracks. It completely flows. Now, they're in the same drama class because Hector Hornsby is well-rounded, but he is not a planner. Because essentially his plan is hope for a crime to happen in front of them, and then he can solve it.
Shall I hear more, or shall I speak at this?
'Tis but thy name that is my enemy.
You see, in this scene, they're performing Romeo and Juliet for maximum foreshadowing. Thankfully, a crime does happen while they're performing, and Andy, a friend and one of the main characters of the series, ends up being held hostage.
Bet that hurt.
Oh man, just that looks hard to get on. The mask part at least. Lana just does not look impressed by this. She is at least nowhere near as impressed as Andy.
Felix took some pictures.
Wonder if I'll ever get to thank him.
I love her outfit though, nostalgia to the max. Part of the fun for me of rewatching this series, or part of it, because I did watch more than one episode after I saw this one, is just looking at Lana's outfits. They're inspiring to me because time of recording that fashion is coming back round again. I should have kept all my stuff.
The name is Microboy.
The episode tries with the whole Lana crush, and had they dedicated a bit more time to it, I think Military could have sold it. He's really emoting, he's giving it his all, he's just not getting it back. Lana is so indifferent that it makes it hard to care in what is supposed to be the core dramatic element. You do feel for Hector though.
Microboy.
So despite making headlines proving that he is a successful superhero, it's on the newspaper. He diffused a hostage situation. His mom still isn't having it. He's still just a natural born loser. He's about to be a natural born killer if this keeps up. Move out, Hector, please. I'll give you some money. I just want somebody to get Hector out of this horrible abusive situation. This time it pushes him over the edge and he gets in the tanning bed. He turns it up to 11. He's sucking in all the microwaves. And here the pacing really rears its head. It's so fast. This is also the moment where it's highlighted that this episode is having a hard time conveying salient details. At no point before this has it even been hinted that Hector needs to consume microwaves or craves them. But our cutaway to Star Labs and Superboy is going to discuss this point, that he's a microwave addict and he needs to consume more and more power. This kind of information seems like the sort that would have been conveyed in narrative boxes or thought balloons in the comic medium, and it would have flowed better and been less obtrusive there. But in this, a television series, it needs to be spoken by the characters, and so it comes across as clunky and rushed. Just the entire rush to the climax is like that.
Microboy?
I'm afraid he's craving more energy with each exposure.
And they had to cut it like that because there was no other place for them to show that Lana was being kidnapped. I'm pretty sure he just kidnapped her. She's super chill about it. It happens to her a lot in the series, but also she just does not have any emotional connection to what's happening. At this point, the motivations start to get a little muddled because we have to rush through them. We have to go from the Lana motivation falling through to villainy to addict to overloading, just all of it. Now Lana recognizes him instantly and she starts Shakespearing at him.
What man art thou, who stumblest on my counsel?
Now she does tell him up front that she doesn't love Superboy for his powers, which is at least partially a filthy lie, but also that that's not how love works, and that just by getting these powers doesn't mean that she's gonna be with him, which fair. Also, kidnapping, no.
Because I love you. And I knew that you would never love me back.
Real love doesn't work that way.
This just leaves him adrift. This was his core motivation, and now what? And also apparently he's an addict now. Like Microwave Man before him, there is a tragic element to Microboy. Always told he would amount to nothing, succeeding and finding no companionship, only further rejection. But it's really not conveyed by the episode. And all of the other issues, the pacing, the costume, everything really push it to the back.
Oh, I see. She wants to be with you, Superboy.
She just told you it's like that. Microboy's dying, by the way. He also decided that he needs to lean into that Romeo-Juliet foreshadowing. So now he wants to kill Lana as he's dying, because it's romantic. And now it's gone beyond crush. She's just unhinged. Is it the microwaves? Was he always just unhinged? We don't have time. They'll die together for l'amour.
Hector, you don't want to do this.
They'll find us together. Like Romeo and Juliet.
But this doesn't happen because he's knocked out with one punch. And that's that. And then they just have to do the time travel solution because there's too much technology and he can't stop absorbing it. Even look at him, they're on the table. He's selling it. I believe. But it's time to do that time travel resolution we didn't get to do in 1978. So Superboy takes him back and dumps him with the Wright brothers so he can help them construct their aircraft. And look, they have a cute cousin who looks just like Lana. This is meant to be heartwarming and not horrifying. He did have lots of models of planes in his room, but that's not strong enough connection to indicate that this ending is his ideal life path and outcome. But in all fairness, there were some nods. We'll put aside the culture shock of being dumped in a time period that one may not necessarily be familiar with no money or contacts or way to do anything, just differences in how you would carry yourself and language. You would get yourself into trouble. We're gonna suspend. We'll suspend our disbelief. That's part of time travel. Suspending. But think about for the present. This is the loss of a talented young man who had already successfully found a way to create superpowers. What else was he capable of? Especially because he didn't seem to actually be villainous, just misguided. But now he's here, exiled to the past, essentially because he cracked under his mother's abuse. There was no indication that this would have gone awry if he hadn't gone and cranked it up.
You're a tinkerer, Hector. You have an inventive mind, just like your father. And like him, you're jinxed. You're a loser.
You can't distract me just because there's a Lana lookalike in the past episode. Justice for Hector Hornsby. And so Superboy exiled another rival for Lana's affections, even though he probably didn't have to because she obviously wasn't into him. Next week, Superboy becomes a vampire. I watched it. It was fun. I'll never turn down a chance to see the Vampire of Steel. As for Microboy, this is not the best episode the series has to offer, by a long shot. And it seems to have gotten bogged down or stuck in the story it borrowed from for inspiration, with that becoming more of a hindrance than a help. What could have improved Microboy is if it had embraced the new elements that it introduced, and just minimized the ones it borrowed. That Microwave Man had invented the machine that gave him his powers at a young age was a background detail of the comic stories, and it was perfectly fine to use as an origin for Microboy. However, that could have been the focal point of this episode. Hector Hornsby, no nerd, seeking to gain Lana's affections and just be impressive amongst his peers. So he invents the machine. He can either admire Superboy or want to replace him. It depends on whether or not one wants to make him a villain out the gate or more of a pitiful character. If the motive was Lana, more time should have been spent there and less with the nagging abusive mom who was so over the top. It was clearly meant to be comical, but it quickly becomes abrasive and uncomfortable. Maybe not necessarily uncomfortable, but certainly unpleasant and repetitious. She repeats the same speech 3 times.
Remind me more of your father every day, just like your father. And like him, you're jinxed. You're a loser. You're always going to be a loser. Just like your father.
when it was most likely only needed once, especially given episode length. Yes, there's the chance they might have missed it in commercial break, but if the other parts of his character were strong, then you wouldn't really have needed it to be so overtly stated anyway. Doing it once, it could still have had the same negative impact. While it would have minimized her role, more time could be seen with him and Lana. Does Lana even know Hector exists outside of just some person that she does lines with in her drama class? Does she like him? Does she not know he exists? Which again could be worked in as a factor. Maybe he's a bit delusional. He was keeping newspaper clippings of her in a scrapbook. She had all of that Silver Age energy. Next he just needed a mannequin. This would admittedly have been a bit of a basic and simple plot, but setting him up as a tragic, doomed rival to Superboy would have worked. And again, with more space, you could have had more room to play with some of the other elements, like introducing time travel or the idea that he's slowly becoming addicted to these waves, instead of having to rush through that because there were several scenes of him just being berated. Now, there's not a lot of time in these episodes, which means one has to be concise, direct, and deliberate. And this episode is trying to pull itself a lot of ways. It's also married to that time travel ending, which while potentially not the strongest, could have worked better in context if there was a bit more agency or reaction given to Hector.
Where are we?
You'll figure it out.
Menacing. This is not a case where the original story enriched or helped its counterpart. Something was lost in translation, and so the old elements don't entirely work, and neither do the new ones. This episode struggles a lot with pacing and balancing, focusing on Microboy's motivations and origin, but also his descent and end. As it stands, this episode is on the lower side of okay. It's still definitely entertaining though. It is bolstered slightly by the performance from Military as Microboy.
A loser with nothing left to lose.
But that's not enough to take it over the edge and make it a good episode with all the other issues it has. Again, that doesn't mean it's not fun. I had a lot of fun. Now, all these are just my thoughts, and I want to hear yours. What do you think of this episode? Do you disagree? Do you think it's a strong one? Do you enjoy the time travel ending? Do you think that's a happy ending for him? It all worked out. It's all coming up Hector. Did you watch this series at all? Were you aware of it? Should we go deeper? Tell me things down below while you're down there. Please do all the YouTube things. Like, share, comment, subscribe. Hit that bell notification so that you never miss a vid. Thanks so much for taking some time today to spend discussing comics and comics adjacent things with me. I always appreciate it, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.